knowing how to deal with adversity and knowing how to get hit in the face and just taking that and then coming back even harder. So in business, people say business is a contact sport, and it is. And being a real estate entrepreneur, like I got hit in the mouth like twice 2 weeks ago.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. My guest on this episode is Derrick Morgan. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he was a first-round draft pick for the Tennessee Titans. He's played 9 years there, and he'll be the first to tell you ever since a young age who is challenging the status quo. A man who has come and realized the importance of financial literacy for himself, to become an investor, an entrepreneur, to go back and get his MBA even, and he was one of the good fights for medical marijuana in the league. He was part of Game Changers, the Netflix documentary about being a vegan. And most importantly, the man has a giant heart and was raised with giant morals that made him want to get back to his community and start impact fund and impact investing to help his community, to help champion the next round of minority entrepreneurs. This is an amazing episode. Derrick is an amazing guy. You're going to want to hear this one. Check it out. Derrick, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Jason, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, excited to dive in.
Yeah, look, tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, from first round draft pick to business mogul and social impact investor, this is a crazy climb, a crazy journey. Not many people ever get to experience something like that. So I want to hear how your story kind of developed.
Yeah, man, it's been a roller coaster to some extent, but all in all, I feel very grateful with the path that God has really allowed for me to follow. I would say, man, just getting a chance. I'm from a small town called Coatesville, Pennsylvania. It's the south side of Philadelphia, and it's an old steel town. Not really much going on there. So for me, my way of getting out was through athletics. And that's really where I narrowed in on when I found out that I could really get my education paid for. You know, my mom and, other mentors in my life were talking about, man, you got to get a free education. That was my number one goal, because education was always very important in my household. It was very, it was priority. So before I had to, go to football practice or wherever, I had to make sure all my homework was done. And that was just I was a student athlete. And so I was always on honor roll A's and B's, in large part to my mom's structure that she had in place. So I was thankful for that in hindsight. But really, when I got a scholarship offer to Georgia Tech, I took it. I graduated early from high school, was on campus in Atlanta in January of 2007. And, my whole mindset was, I just want to play. I don't want a red shirt. I want to get on the field as early as I can. And was able to play as a true freshman on special teams, came back sophomore year, had a really solid year. And then junior year is really when I broke out, and had, a very dominant year in a lot of categories, sacks, CFLs, et cetera. But in large part was due to the mentality and the work ethic that I had coming into that last year. Was really just ready to go on to the NFL, because I was seeing a lot of people that I was playing with, like, man, if he made it, then I might have a shot at this thing. So I really dove into it, man, and was able to get drafted first round. And unfortunately, but fortunately, had a season-ending knee injury my rookie year. And so tore my ACL, my meniscus, MCL, just blew my whole knee out. And you're talking about somebody who had never really had any major injuries. And so that was a real blow, on many levels, even from an identity to a, just what's my value. Like, I was on the sideline, I was always in the game. I never missed practice, never missed games. So for me to be on the sideline watching with this weight of expectation as a first round pick was very jarring. And it forced me in a lot of ways to wake up, really establishing my identity and who I was, and what that really meant. Also, just in terms of this narrative of a football player and what did that really mean? And if this career was to be over today, I didn't even know what else I was going to be, what else was I good at? What was I going to do? And so that was a scary thought to say, like, if this thing were to be over, what's the rest of your life consist of? And at 22, you're not really thinking like that. But this injury forced me to sit down and evaluate a lot of things in my life. And now at 32, I'm thankful that took place, because, my trajectory was, I don't know where I would have ended up. But thankfully I was able to have this kind of like coming to Jesus moment where I was able to recalibrate and reprioritize things. And it really set me on my trajectory that I'm on today.
I mean, the mindset that you have to have in order to experience something like that and be like, okay, I'm going to come back. I think many people don't get it. Many people watching sports, for example, on TV, okay, he had an injury. Maybe his season's done, but like, okay, he'll go get a job. He'll be fine. Or he made his millions in year one, whatever, he'll be fine. It's very hard for an average person. And I mean, average in the sense of not a professional athlete, but someone who does a day-to-day job and does their 9 to 5, they won't experience something like that. Talk to me about like the mental, like the way you have to adjust mentally in order to experience that, because this was your all in, right? It's like having a job saying this is your all in, and that job firing you and you have nothing lined up after that. And not many people are ever put in a position like that. So I want to kind of make this relatable a little bit to people, because it's a monumental mindset that you have to overcome there.
Yeah, it's just like I tell people, like, just think about doctors or neurosurgeons or whatever the case. You put 10, 15 years of education and, residencies and all this, education, and this is what you are, this is what you do. And then for some reason, the next day you can't do it no more. Like, that's a very, that wakes you up. And that, like you said, not a lot of people experience that. It's more of a gradual transition. But for athletes, it's all or nothing a lot of the times when it comes to professional level. But it's rightly so. Like, you almost have to be very narrow in your approach to get to that level. And so it's high risk, high reward. But the mindset is, okay, once you get to that level, A, how do you stay at that level? And B, this level doesn't always last. Like, you could be a doctor for 40 plus years. You can't play in the NFL unless you're Tom Brady for 40 plus years. So it's one of those things where you got to diversify yourself, and you got to understand what you're good at outside of being just an athlete. And that is a process, because you've put so much into this one thing over the last 20 years. From the time I was 10 years old, I've been groomed to be an athlete, right? But your career path is only this short little window. And so it's a catch-22 in some respects, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, because what it has done has allowed me to play on such of a platform, man, to just have a certain level of influence. And what I was able to understand at a younger age, because of some of my adversity, was how powerful that platform was. And to start thinking about how to use it, not only for myself, but for the good of others, like for the people who came from Coatesville that didn't make it out, right? So how do you leverage who you are and your influence for the good of others who don't have the same opportunities? And so, probably halfway through my career, when I'm 2 kids in by this time, married, whole different mindset on life, where I wasn't living as selfishly, and started to think about others more than myself. Not all the time, obviously. I'm not, Mother Teresa, but it was more so like, okay, like, there's got to be a way to leverage this thing. And so that really opened me up to a lot of different industries, like impact investing, like real estate development, and all these different things that were capitalistic in the context of like those industries, but with the mindset that I had, which a lot of it came from philanthropy, but taking that mindset of helping people, but not only helping people, but empowering people through these traditional capitalistic means, right? Of investing in businesses or developing real estate projects, really looking at it holistically of how is everybody affected by this? not just the bottom line of what I'm going to make on my money. And so that really started me on my path of where I'm at today and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis currently.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm going to dive deep into that. Like I have so many questions about that. Um, I had a clothing brand before I started my agency and before we started working with clients. And I worked with a bunch of professional athletes, and my time meeting a lot of them, there's one thing I always hear is that when they love the sport, there's a love for playing, but when they go pro, they quickly realize that it's a business, right? It's not the same as when they were playing in school. It's not the same as when, you know, they were playing for fun out on the streets. It's a business. The NFL was, and still is a business. It's a hard adjustment for a lot of professional athletes. Did you feel that way at all?
Yeah, yes, but I wasn't surprised. I would say I was prepared as I could have been for the business of the NFL and also the transition from out of the NFL. I would say you're absolutely correct in your analysis in college. You know, I wasn't even worried about my stats, like literally until like the last part of my junior year when somebody was like, hey, you're in striking distance of the sack record. And when I started focusing on that, my play suffered because I was so worried about the stats and all that. And I wasn't just in the moment enjoying the game. And when you get to the NFL, it's all about that. It's not this team camaraderie, you know, like it is in college. It's special because you choose to go there. You know, I went to Georgia Tech largely in part because of my recruiting class and the relationships I had with my teammates. In the NFL, it's not like that. It's a revolving door, especially if you're on a team like, you know, back in 2010, Titans weren't really like an awesome team. So it was a revolving door. And even more so like 2014, 2015, like, I mean, from that stretch, we won 5 games in 2 years. And so that was a real hard thing and just on many levels, but just seeing how quickly a locker room can turn over, all the people that were getting cut. I remember when I started, we had a workout my rookie year right before, like right during cut day. And I started the workout with like 7, 8 other rookies. And by the time the workout was over, in the span of 45 minutes, it was me and one other person that was left. You know, they was coming and getting them, like, hey, get your playbook. So that is something that I've seen early. I had 5 head coaches, man, 3 general managers, you know, a couple position changes. Like I seen a lot by just kind of being in one spot, coincidentally. So it was something that I learned early on, man. And, you know, being a first round pick, they want you to come in and produce day one. So I was already getting called a bust from, you know, tearing my ACL and coming back from that ACL and not having a great year. And, you know, it was a lot of pressure.
How does that weigh? How does that weigh on you? Because we think athletes are like, they don't hear the noise, they don't hear all that, they don't hear the media, they just go out and perform. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, you're aware of it, man. I don't care what you say, especially now, man. There's so many touch points, you know, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. You turn it on, you're gonna get, you know, you're gonna see something. And so it was I think I had the highest expectations out of anybody on myself. And you pair that with the world's expectations of you, oh man, you know, it's a lot of weight. And you know, playing through injuries, like a lot of the times, like, man, I gotta play because I can't be a bust. I gotta go and I gotta play on a high ankle sprain. I gotta play on a torn meniscus. And, you know, coming into my second year, I had surgery again on my same knee that I blew out and played 15 days later. So it was like, man, like I was so wanting to like please people, right? And prove people wrong. But it's a trap though. You can't please everybody. You'll never please everybody. And you got to play really for an audience of one, and you got to really compete with yourself. And that's something that I didn't get until probably midway, you know, latter part of my career. But it's, you know, it's weight. You know, you're aware of it, man. Like it ain't like you just can just block everything out unless you just turn everything off, which is really hard to do. So yeah, it's there.
When did you start like really paying attention to financial literacy? And do you think they're doing a good enough job with the athletes today in sports of really trying to make them understand financial literacy and life after their playing time?
When you say they, are you talking about the league and the unions?
I'm
Or
saying, in general, I don't know whose responsibility it comes down to. Does it come down to the agent? Does it come down to the manager? Does it come down to the team? Does it come down to the league? Is it the union? Who?
Yeah.
I mean, or is it just none of these people? They're responsible to run their organization. The agent's responsible to get the best contract so he can make money and they could make money and they could all be happy. And it's really just comes down to the athlete to figure out and learn financial literacy. And that could be an okay answer too. I don't know who's supposed to get that. I don't know who's supposed to be. And I think the fact that we're actually having this conversation shows that the answer is probably no, they're not doing a good enough job doing this because we don't even know who's supposed to properly be doing it. So I guess I'll change the question. Who in your mind do you think the responsibility comes down to? And then how did you take it upon yourself to start taking that seriously?
Man, it's funny because nobody really, like, most people will say it's your advisor to educate you on financial decisions and estate planning and taxes, and right, like that should be your advisor's role because you've hired them for a specific, because they have a specific skill set and they're supposed to guide you, and that's what they're getting paid to do. But how often does that really happen? Rarely. And it's not all on them. Like, I remember I was 21 and 22. I wasn't asking the right questions because I wasn't prioritizing it. Right?
You also don't know what questions to ask, in all fairness, right?
You don't know exactly. You don't know what to ask. I didn't know how to write a check when I got to the league. Right? Like, I didn't have financial literacy. I worked a lot. I had 7 jobs by the time I left high school, but I didn't have a sophistication with finances. My mindset was more so just survival mode because that's how we lived, right? It was paycheck to paycheck and pay your bills, and hopefully you got enough to go eat at Applebee's, so that's how it worked. But it was more of a transition period when you came into some money, like, oh, like you're now the financial patriarch of your family and everybody's looking at you to save them, right, from their financial woes and their bad financial decisions. But what I would say, what's really woke me up, I had a crazy couple years in the first couple years in the league, man. Like, tore my ACL, had a baby, and then lost some money. And I had, a very passive relationship with my finances because, I hired this person. You're supposed to take care of my money and steward it in the right ways. And that's what you're good at. I'm going to go over here and make money on the field. But it didn't work like that. Within 6 to 12 months of me being with this firm, I think it was my second or third year, they were basically caught up in some type of fraudulent scheme where the SEC had them on their watch list. And I was getting emails and, from the players union, like, hey, if you have this person, like, watch out. And I was like, I do. And so long story short, ended up losing some money, nothing catastrophic, but it was enough to like hurt where it was like, whoa, like, what are you doing? And it was probably like 15 to 20 athletes that were wrapped up into this thing. Some guys lost millions. And so that experience at age 23, 22 was like, okay, I no longer can be passive with my finances. I got to check my account. I need to understand what this transfer means. I need to understand, why am I allocated this percentage into bonds and this percentage into stocks? And what is my end goal here? And so from that experience, I really just took a hands-on approach. And I started to ask a million questions, Jason. Like, I was calling my advisor every other day, like, hey, John, like, what does this mean? Why am I getting charged this fee for this transaction? And what is it? You know what I'm saying? Like, just fundamental questions that a lot of us are, and I know myself, I was guilty of just being too prideful and not being humble enough to say I don't know.
Do you think it's pride? Do you think it's prideful, or because I see this mistake in business all the time where people mistake delegation and abdication, right? Like, they want to outsource something And there is a responsibility, right? Like there is a difference between delegating and totally abdicating your responsibility. And sometimes when you get a financial advisor, like in a position like this, you're in your early 20s, you're coming in, you're getting thrown money at you, and you have a guy who's supposed to be in charge. It's like, no, you go run with it. I don't know this stuff. That's abdicating versus now you're delegating the responsibility. Now you're part of the, you want to know what's going on, but you run the show. I'm just going to ask questions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think more, it needs to be more of the latter than what you originally mentioned, because when you completely just remove yourself from the process, that's when the fraudulent things happen. That's when people get swindled out of doubt and their money. But I went all the way, the other extreme end of the spectrum, where I was just like, no, I want to know every transaction. I'm checking my account every day. And when you lose money, you're like, nah, I'm never letting it up to nobody else to take care of my finances. I don't care if I gotta spend time during the season, after the season, I'm flying to see you. I'm gonna ask all the dumb questions, because as an athlete, as a professional athlete, you don't ever want to be, you don't ever want to feel like you're not the greatest at something, you're not, or you're outside your comfort zone. So for a lot of athletes,
like the dumb athlete, like
the stereotypical
dumb athlete. Yeah.
I didn't want to be that at all. I was like, man, I don't want to be that guy, but it don't matter because they're already looking at you like that. It doesn't matter. So I'm like, look, you guys already think I'm clueless. I might as well start asking all these damn questions. So that's what I did, man. And what I'm thankful for is most guys, they get put in these very conservative asset allocations. I was in 80% bonds, like 80% bonds and like 15% stocks and the rest treasuries. And I'm like, I get it, because that's how you preserve your money, but that's not how you grow your money. So I'm like, okay, I get it, preservation, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm starting to learn alternative investments. Yes, maybe it's a little bit more risk, but yes, I understand the risk. Why aren't we investing in real estate? Why aren't we investing in private equity? Why aren't we putting a little bit in venture capital? So I started looking at these different industries and learning about it and understanding the risk, and then finding people that I trusted within those industries that could help shape my thinking on how to invest into those industries. And that's what I've done ever since 2014, is really branched out and diversified and got out of the traditional cookie cutter approach.
And now you're an entrepreneur, right? And entrepreneurship is a lonely sport versus you played your whole life a team sport. So I guess I'm curious, in your mind, as someone who's played both, not many people on a professional level, you're a professional entrepreneur, you do really well for yourself. You went back, you got your MBA, something we could definitely talk about. You're a smart guy, a really talented entrepreneur and a talented professional athlete who played a team sport. What skills do you think being an athlete prepared you the most for the business world?
Knowing how to deal with adversity and knowing how to get hit in the face and just taking that and then coming back even harder. So in business, people say business is a contact sport, and it is. And being a real estate entrepreneur, like, I got hit in the mouth like twice 2 weeks ago. And it was like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, I wasn't expecting that. And it really, I had to like problem solve and get creative and like deal with the adversity and then continue to persist. That's what athletes like, we'll get hit with adversity, whether it's an injury, whether it's a bad play, whether it's whatever it is, but then you got to find a way to overcome the adversity and then come back harder. And the persistence of that, always striving, is like where a lot of people I see don't make it. They'll get stuck in this comfort zone or this fear of failure, where you don't push through the discomfort, you don't push through the adversity, and you settle. So I think that ambition that I had to become a professional athlete, I now take on the other side of, I see a goal, I set a goal, I see a target, I'm gonna hit that target with that, no matter what it takes. And so it's one of those things where I've developed that muscle memory over years and years of playing football and having to overcome things, and now translate that into the business world.
I think that's well said. And I think that definitely applies in every area of your life. I think adversity happens in your personal life, your business life. I think that's a lesson we could take on all sides. I want to hear a
Yeah.
little bit about your. I want to hear a little bit about your impact fund and how did you come to grow that, and also I'd love to hear how you now have become almost the champion, I guess, of creating the next generation of minority entrepreneurs, and why that was, I'm going to go take care of me, and then that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to focus on next, and why starting an impact fund was so important to you.
Yeah, man. It goes back to what we talked about around, okay, it's more to life than just you being successful and you being at this certain stage. And to me, I just feel like God's blessed me with such of a ability, just to be a blessing to others and to be an impact for my community. And when I started to think about retirement, 2018 was my last year. I knew it was my last year. I was just ready to, mentally I wasn't there, and physically my body was just, starting to deteriorate. And I was like, man, I'm not going to do this. I'm 9 years in. I'm 29 years old. Which I probably could have gotten another couple of years. I could have stole a couple years, like they say. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to, launch into my next chapter. And so when I was going through that first off season in 2019, the first place I went back to was my hometown. And we had done, numerous community outreaches over the years, but really never seen the needle being moved in a meaningful way. And so when I went back there, I went back with a different perspective. And it was an economic perspective to say, how can we help these people who are in poverty, 35% poverty rate in my hometown, yet situated in the richest county in Pennsylvania? How can we leverage resources to empower people? Does that mean investing in businesses? Does that mean creating workforce development, jobs training programs? Does that mean creating youth engagement, ways to engage the youth? All these plethora of things. And so from going back to my hometown, I started to learn about things like opportunity zones. Opportunity zones was a part of the 2017 tax overhaul, and it designated certain census tracts as opportunity zones based on poverty levels and et cetera, which gave investors who put their money in these places a tax incentive. And so that was, to me, okay, great. The program's not perfect, but it's a tool. What are the tools that we can deploy to help areas like my hometown? And so when I started to look across the board of, opportunity zones and these areas where largely are underserved and resources don't flow to, I said, wow, okay, this is a great resource. It's a great tool. And then more broadly speaking, I just kind of started to see myself as this intermediary, right? Because there's people in different tax brackets usually don't associate with one another. There's not a problem of capital up here. People who have capital are always trying to work their capital and allocate it. But they may have, great goals, social, environmental goals with their capital, but they just don't understand where to put it. And so if I'm down here in this tax bracket and I'm screaming we need help, we need resources, we need blah, 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 I'm not reaching up to this level. There's no connection. So as a professional athlete, a lot of us come from these areas down here, but now we've been able to get to this tax bracket and get in these rooms and get in these circles where people who are, rubbing elbows with the professional athlete, but it's yeah, cool, about, Peyton Manning, yeah, cool, great. But my hometown down here, we got a 35% poverty rate. People don't have jobs. We need to figure out how to funnel this money to this community in a meaningful way, blah, 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 blah. So that's where I started to see myself as yo, this is the role that we need to be playing, right? We have relationships, we have a great network, and the team, our group is called KNGDM Group, and our team is very diverse. We have a large, robust network of family offices, foundations, institutions, community leaders, churches, nonprofits, and we have this crazy ecosystem where there's a lot of resources and there's also a lot of opportunities. And so when I started to really like assess the landscape, I said, this is something that I see myself being very effective in. And so we took that ideology and said, look, let's do this in not only your hometown, but markets across the Southeast and in places that we're familiar with, Austin, Nashville, Atlanta, Birmingham, and where we have those relationships. And so that's how we've been working, man. It's been just over 2 years, and a lot of trial and error, but start really feeling that we have found a sweet spot to really create impact.
I'm curious because you become like a role model and the role model. And we talked about the different weight an athlete feels. Do you feel the weight that you needed to be a role model? Because I understand, I want to preface this, I don't understand, but I could hear how some athletes sit there and say, hey, I'm not a role model. I'm a professional athlete. This is about me. I'm playing a sport. You get to watch. I'm not a professional athlete. And then you get the ones that do use their platform, and then they get criticized, like shut up and dribble, right? Like just hey, you're an athlete, just go do your job. Do you feel like every athlete has that responsibility to be a role model? And if so, and you clearly felt it for yourself, did that weigh in on you? Does that weigh on you throughout your playing time as well?
It's all down to personal belief. If you feel and you're convicted to do something, you're gonna do it not out of compulsion or guilt. For me, it was more of a conviction, not a condemnation, right? There's a difference. And for me, I felt very convicted to do things because you see all this social injustice and the social unrest, and you're like, how can I be a part of the solution? But if you don't feel that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that that's not what's for you, right? Maybe you have something something else to offer the world. And so, but if you do it out of a guilt and a feeling condemned and feeling like you have to do it, your authenticity and your drive and your motivation won't be there. It's not going to sustain you when the going gets tough, right? When you get punched in the mouth and you're just like, what am I doing this for anyway? Because your why won't be there. And so if your why isn't there, then you shouldn't feel obligated to do something. Like, now my belief is, yeah, you've gotten to a certain platform and you just don't turn your back on everybody. Like, all right, y'all, good luck. That's just not how I'm made up. And so my conviction came a lot from my upbringing, my relationship with God, and what my values are. And
what was it pure conviction, or because you were raised that way and because you had the mindset, you felt obligated to? There was a little bit of obligation, like I can't turn my back on my community.
Probably some mixed in there. I guess it's more of a conditioning, right? Like, It was almost conditioned, like, yo, you gotta take care of, not that you're gonna take care of everybody, but you gotta like look out for those who come from where you come from, or who don't have an opportunity, right? Like, that's kind of like, I guess, been subconsciously programmed in my brain from an early age, and that's how I was brought up. And so not everybody has similar upbringing. Some people just, look, I'm looking out for myself, and me and my family, we're good, and that's all I need to worry about. Look, cool. So that's why I say it's an individual decision. I don't think that it's a blanket responsibility for all athletes to do what I'm doing or have similar convictions. I don't think that that's fair. And a lot of times Black athletes in particular are pigeonholed as like, yo, you have to do this because look at Black communities and communities of color. And I get that argument, but I don't feel like it's fair to obligate somebody to do something that they don't feel is authentic to them.
I love that answer. I'm going to wrap up with this, and then I want to give you the opportunity to tell people how they could get involved with Kingdom, or how they could benefit you the way you're benefiting so many others. You're a big champion for medical marijuana, something you've been very, very vocal about for a long time. Anyone who's followed you knows that. I guess the question is why, right? I mean, why, and why was it so important to you? Not why it should that rule change? And do you find that the NFL's bend to marijuana was a giant victory to you?
Okay, let me just start at the beginning. For me, it was a more of a it was almost more of a necessity that I speak up about it, because once I learned about it and I learned of the functionality and the medical applications of it, I just felt like a lot of us were in the dark. Like, yo, athletes smoke weed all day, but it ain't about, medical, purposes. This is like, yo, I had a hard day, I'm about to roll up, and that is what it is. That's just the culture. But a lot of the times, there's been things that have been intentionally kept from the general public, and I think cannabis was a victim of that for many reasons. And I don't want to go all the way back, to why. But when I seen the stories of guys killing themselves, and for a long period of time, CTE was a weekly headline back in 2014, 2015. And you got guys like Junior Seau committing suicide, and even one of my former teammates committed suicide when I was playing with him. And so it's one of those things that kind of hits you. It's like, man, is that going to be me 5, 10 years down the line? I'm not that old, but I have been playing football for a long time. So what are my options? Like, how do I protect my brain the best I can, and not just get not shoved down Percocets every day? And when I started looking into medical cannabis, specifically CBD, cannabidiol oil, it was one of those things where I was like, whoa, like there's a patent on this. The US Department of Health has a patent on CBD oil as a neuroprotectant. I'm like, why doesn't the mass population know about this? Maybe it's not profitable. Maybe it's, hush, hush, let's keep the pharmaceuticals flowing. Who knows? But for me, it was like, all right, I'm seeing people who have epilepsy, and I'm seeing people who have, all these pain, fibromyalgia, and all these things that they're dealing with, and they're taking CBD, and they're being relieved from these ailments. I'm like, man, this ain't right. I literally was the girl. I don't know if you remember, that there was a brand called Charlotte's Web, and there was this girl who was suffering from seizures. It was a documentary that I watched called Weed, and it really dove into it. And then I started doing my own research. Eugene Monroe, who was the first active player to be an advocate for marijuana, he started sending me a whole bunch of research, started really diving into it, looking at stuff out of Israel. And I'm like, man, this is scientific. This is not subjective. This is very scientific data that is very promising. Why is nobody talking about this? And so when Eugene Monroe gave me the opportunity to join him and do an interview with Katie Couric back in 2015, I was like, I jumped all over it. And so from that moment, it was like, man, more guys need to know about this. We need to understand what our options are, because a lot of people walk away from the game of football messed up, man. And so if there's one tool or one thing that we could like do that's going to help us out, why are we not being told about it? So I felt an obligation, man, that's where I did feel an obligation to feel like I needed to spread the word about something like this.
Love it. So do you find the victory, like the bend, like you're happy? Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a victory, but NFL always is about they're subjected to the court of public opinion. And so if the US, wasn't favorable on legalizing cannabis, the NFL would not be favorable on legalizing it for their players. So it's not authentic by any means.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where if it's culturally acceptable, they'll give on it. But they were always using that as a negotiation tactic in the collective bargaining agreement. All those negotiations, it was like, hey guys, play 18 games and you can smoke all the weed you want. And it was like, come on, man, like that's not the same. We're not comparing apples to apples, but that's another story.
Love it. Derrick, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for all the work you do. For the people who want to learn more about you, get involved in whether it's Kingdom or any way, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
Yeah, Jason, thanks for having me on. My social media handles are DMorg, DMORG 91. Our website is kingdomgroup.com. That's Kingdom, with no vowels, KNGDM Group.com. And yeah, hit us up, reach out to us. Would love to talk.
Is that an athlete thing? Like, I'm a professional athlete. Fuck it. I don't need vowels, right? I don't need vowels. I don't need vowels. I'm not you common folk. I'm a professional athlete. I don't use vowels.
Keep your damn vowels over there. I don't need no damn vowels.
Love it, brother. Thank you so much. Really appreciate having you on.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Jason.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want, check out our most recent video over here. And this one is the one YouTube thinks you'll like. But if you really enjoyed watching, please do me a favor, like and subscribe over here. Thank you so much.